Hi friends. I was thinking about different kinds of animal advocacy, and you could put that in quotes in a way, that we engage in today. And there's three different kinds that I see. There's probably more, but there's three different kinds. One is the one where we think breaking into cages and destroying property is the way to go. And of course, and I'll just speak a little bit about that. That's groups that there's a certain amount of sort of anger at the state. It's a misplaced anger because it's human beings who create demand for animal products and for animal use. So breaking into suppliers of those forms of animal use, like labs where they conduct animal vivisection, experimentation, studies, except all that sort of thing, that's problematic. Then it's problematic because it's a sort of a hyper-masculine posturing in a way. It doesn't really, what it does is it just makes the public go against people that claim to be trying to end that particular form of animal use, because the public at the present time, because they're not vegan, they see animal use as and not destroying what they consider property as they consider that important. So if people are going around destroying cages and destroying, burning down farms and whatever else, and threatening people who engage in animal vivisection, all it does is make us look like a fringe kind of loopy group. And it also is, and it turns the public against us. And oftentimes people that engage in those activities are quite misanthropist, and so they use an animal movement to excuse them and to give them a reason for being misanthropist or for being violent. The posturing, it's really a sort of a patriarchal thing in a way. I can understand sometimes the motivation for wanting to do that, because sometimes it may seem unbearable what's going on for animals, but it really isn't going to get anybody anywhere. It makes the people engaged in those activities feel good, but it doesn't really do much to end anything, and it just turns the public against people who are trying to do, say, vegan education or something like that. Then there's the groups that are not so much doing illegal activities, but they're doing activities, for example, Direct Action Everywhere, groups like that, who in some ways are doing illegal activities because that's being seen, going into restaurants and shops, etc., is seen as going on to people's private property and then disturbing their business. So that can be viewed by the state as illegal, and I think they're starting to clamp down on that. If they catch people in CCTV cameras, I think they can sort of prosecute them in some ways. So that's going to become more and more problematic, particularly as the state, as corporate powers clamp down and influence government more and more, which they're doing. So, but there's also another problem with that sort of activity, and that is that try to imagine if you're, say, eating dinner with some friends and you think what you're eating is perfectly fine, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not like vegans might see it as dead, as vegans see it as dead, dead parts of sentient beings on their plates, or dead or secretions or whatever, that they're sentient beings. So just imagine, though, you're sitting there and you're enjoying your what you consider food, what you consider something, an enjoyable activity with family and friends, and then a group of people come into that establishment and start shouting at you and at whoever else is there, and holding up signs. Well, the probably immediate thing would be, what on earth's going on, and possibly even a bit of a fear reaction. And then the next thing would be, these people are interfering with my evening with my friends. I wish they'd go away. And so there's this sort of an irritability. And then they probably see, as this happens in direct action everywhere, protests, they usually see a restaurant owner getting quite upset and irate and trying to shove them outside. And then there's shouting probably going on sometimes between the activists and the business owner. And it kind of gets very messy, and then but then there's some that don't want to leave, and so they continue shouting slogans at the customers. And I realize some people might think that's edgy, but if you're actually thinking about outcomes, the outcomes of that, the outcomes are poor. If in fact it actually probably has the opposite effect, because next time something actually comes up about animals and animal exploitation or veganism or whatever, because apart from the fact that Direct Action Everywhere and groups like them don't promote veganism, they are promoting animals being, I don't know what they're promoting, but it's not anything that the public can get their head around. And they don't expect their own members to be vegan either. From what I understand, they don't ask them if they are. But the public just end up being irritated, and it doesn't. And because those groups don't usually promote veganism, clearly, they have pledges which are actually more like vegetarian pledges than anything. And then they also suggest not to eat with people who are eating animal products, not to be around them, including your family. That can be problematic too. I can understand why people don't want to don't want to be at a table where people are eating animal products. But there are things where if you never want to have anything to do with your family again, then if you take that position, you're guaranteed to never ever be invited to any events, and that just means that just really doesn't actually help all that much, particularly if you want to influence people in the mainstream, non-vegans, if you want to influence them, segregating yourself and kind of sending out that message that your activities are too disgusting for me to want to spend time around you. It's not really helpful. Yes, of course, it's awful seeing people consuming animal products. If you're at a table, it's disturbing. But if we actually want to change the paradigm, if we want to influence people, then it's not helpful sending out messages that what they're doing is disgusting and shouting at them and holding up slogans and seeming very angry, and it's a very posturing, patriarchal kind of a thing to do. It really is. People might think that, no, it's not, that it's edgy and radical and that it's in the vein of Martin Luther King and all that kind of thing. Not really. Also, shouting at people and telling them they're disgusting because they're white doesn't really help. It's not helpful in anti-racist education. It's not helpful at all. Martin Luther King didn't do that. Dr. Cornel West, who's an incredible black activist, author, he's an amazing guy. He doesn't tell white people they're disgusting when he's trying to make a point about structural racism and or white supremacy or white privilege, etc. He he's inclusive and he talks to people. He educates people, and a lot of the people that are on his social media page are white. It's not really beneficial. That's away from the track, but there's a certain amount of that happens in vegan advocacy groups of thinking that telling white people they're disgusting or they're basically they're fucked over and over and over again, that is some sort of anti-racist education. But it's not. It's not really. It's just telling white people they're fucked, and eventually what was probably going to happen is those people who are probably allies are going to get tired of it because it's really not education. It's just telling white people they're fucked. And yes, there's a lot of reason to be angry at white people. Absolutely. Absolutely. But that isn't really education. It's just venting. Venting and getting angry. Another kind of groupthink in animal advocacy also is, and you probably know what group I'm talking about. I don't need to mention it here. They've in the past attacked me on a regular basis. The position of trying to run anybody off that isn't part of their group, because for whatever reason, I think you probably know why if you have paid attention to my Vegan Trove podcasts, particularly from October and November 2005. But there's that sort of advocacy of demeaning people, demeaning other abolitionist activists in public and behind the scenes, and doing it as a modus operandi if those people aren't following behind the person who's running a particular social media page or is not a part of that group. That's not really helpful either. In fact, it sort of seems very counterproductive to attack those who are actually, particularly individuals who are actually doing morally consistent vegan education, trying to run them offline or or demeaning them in public or demeaning their work when their work is completely, there's nothing wrong with it. For example, the Be Fair, Be Vegan campaign, campaigns like that, demeaning those that are involved with it and that kind of thing. Completely counterproductive for a group that claims to be grassroots and that wants grassroots activism to grow. Trying to scorch the grass all around you because it's not part of your little tree, whatever. It's not part of your little garden. It's not really promoting grassroots activism. It's top-down activism. So that's another kind of groupthink, which is unfortunate and very counterproductive. It's kind of a destruction of a movement in a way. So I'm all for community. I'm all for people getting together and supporting one another. But I'm particularly, the most important thing is the message and if that's presented in a very, very clear way. And the last group I mentioned, their message is good, but the activities, the behavior they engage in actually ends up sort of neutralizing that message in a way and actually ends up preventing the spread of a morally consistent message through others that may not be a part of their group. It's just sort of preventing anything else but that group from spreading the message. Well, that's not grassroots. So I'm more than happy to support people who are not engaging in that kind of activity. Those activities I mentioned, I'm more than happy to it has to be one, non-violent. It has to not be playing into major ego stuff and patriarchal nonsense or violence, because it has to have those aspects, and the message has to be one that is not promoting, quote, humane, end quote, animal slavery, or single issue campaigns that just promote speciesism, or these reducitarian type things of reducing intake of animal products or whatever. And there's more and more of those reducitarian type things, which obviously large new welfarist groups have realised that's a real winner, because when you're just asking people to cut down on their on behaviour that's participating in violence, well, they don't say that, but if you're just asking people to cut down, well, that you can go on and on and on forever, and be incredibly popular. Often the most popular groups, the most popular activities are the ones where we're not really challenging anybody. You can't actually have a movement that is trying to change the current discourse and the current belief that animals are our property, our resources, if you're promoting things that are still encouraging people to engage in those things which you say you want to end. Although a lot of those large animal groups, all the large animal groups, don't really talk much about ending. They claim to be abolitionists, but what they see as abolitionist is that one day, far, far in the future, it all might end. It's just that I don't want it to interfere with my career. No one who has a career where they're getting an income is likely to want any of these activities like single issue campaigns which bring in money, or promoting happy animal slavery, any of those things where their career could go on and on and on ad infinitum, because that animal exploitation is never going to end with that sort of promotion. The people engaged in those activities in these large groups, large animal groups, are never going to have to fear their career ending, or that they'll have to do something to do, because that's never going to bring about a vegan world. It's never going to bring about a vegan world by telling people to just cut back when they feel like it, and oh, good on you, patting them on the back, as they cut out for a week, or cut back, or they cut out one animal product and do that for a couple of years and then cut back. I mean, they'll take forever. It just doesn't. If it's not an ethical message where you're saying any of it, no matter how little of it, any animal exploitation, any sort of eating small amounts of cheese when you go out to dinner because you don't want to upset people, all that kind of stuff, the flexitarian stuff, all of it is engaging in violence. It's either you're either rejecting it or you don't really believe in what you're doing. If you don't believe in what you're doing, if you don't really believe that animals are sentient beings and that they have the right to be, they have the right to not be used as a resource. If you really don't believe in that, then you're going to be promoting cutting back and or eating, or being flexitarian and eating animal products when you're out and all that kind of stuff, and telling others to reduce. Because if you truly believed it, in here, right? If you truly believed it in here, you would not be saying that to anybody. At worst, you would shut up. But you would not be promoting that to anybody. And that's the problem with a lot of advocacy, in quotes, that's going on today. I don't think people even know what they're doing anymore. I don't even think people are even thinking about animals. Animals sort of are out there somewhere. If they were people, would we be doing that? I keep saying that to people. If they were humans, would we be saying that? Would we be saying, well, child abuse is always going to be in existence, so let's just ask people to, when they're abusing them, not to be, not to do it for so long, or only do it on certain days, or, child abuse is ubiquitous, but we don't go around saying that to people. So if we have a different set of standards when we're talking about non-human animals, then inside our hearts and our head, we really don't believe that they're morally equal to us. And we can make all kinds of excuses that, there's never going to be, people aren't going to turn vegan overnight, and there's never going to be a vegan planet, so we just have to, be pragmatic. They're just all excuses. And often the people that say that have some sort of career path. Or they like getting together. You know what I'm saying? Or they like getting together with their friends on Saturdays at their KFC protests or whatever. Or there's a sort of a whole sexual pool of people that they can tap into at DXE events. All, good-looking vegans that they want to meet up with. There's all sorts of motivations. I'm not saying everybody has that motivation, but sometimes a lot of these things just seem to be big social clubs for meeting other vegans. Big social clubs for young vegans to meet up with one another. I can understand vegans wanting to meet up with one another, but can't we do it under a morally consistent message? Can't we do it without screaming at people and shouting or breaking into things? Or can't we do it without running other people down because they're not under your same social media page? I mean, talk about the fractures, and then of course there's just the let's all hold hands with everybody, and this includes people who are abolitionists. Let's all hold hands with everybody because and we don't want to criticize anybody, and I'm not talking about ad hominem attacks, I mean critiquing other people. We don't want to do that because we want everybody wants to be friends. Everybody wants to have a greater group of people behind them. I kind of despair. I despair. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. I'm sure there's probably other things I could say. There's other kinds of groups and there's other kinds of activities. I don't have any dislike particularly for anybody, but I despair. I mean, I despair about the direction